So the real estate market is crazy. You're thinking of selling your house, and you're thinking that you may sell it to a friend or family member. We're going to talk about whether that's a good idea or not, when it's a good idea, when it's a bad idea. So we're going to map out the pros and cons for you about selling your house to a friend or family member.
So when I've heard this happen, I think one of the things I always think about first is, do these people understand? Do you understand what the market value is of your home? And if you think you do understand what the value is, how did you actually come to that conclusion? There are so many ways to determine the market value. So let's talk a little bit about what market value is.
So typically people will get their market value if they're a homeowner from a couple different places. So one is going to be recent sales in the neighborhood where they see a flyer and a sign go out and they see a listed price. Typically, they don't always know what the home ended up selling for, especially if it's fresh. The second place is on an online algorithm, right? So it's either Zillow or Redfin.
Mm-hmm.
The last place you want to look for that value is your tax assessment that you receive, because that's typically going to be a lot lower than what somebody would pay for the house.
I would say all three of these sources are ways you can kind of get a general idea.
And by the way, do those three values ever agree with each other?
No.
It's pretty rare, right?
They never do.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why you don't necessarily want to rely on one, because let's throw out a price.
Yeah, let's say the house is $500,000 on Zillow.
Yeah.
Right?
It could be $585 on Redfin.
Right.
Very
and then you
common.
look up the tax value.
Yeah.
And it's going to be like $430
Exactly.
or something like that.
So it's super confusing. So again, step number one, what is the place actually worth? In today's market, if it were going to be sold, listed and sold in our environment is a bidding war environment. So it's figuring out, okay, not only what our house is going for above asking that are at a similar price, but what are the ones going for above asking that sell in the first few days? That's a different number. So I'll give you an example. $500,000 house in our market sells for, on average, 4% above asking. So that's $520. But of those same homes, the ones that sell that are priced right, that sell in the first 5 days on average in our market, are actually 7% above the asking price. So that's $535. So already you're talking about a $15,000 difference.
Yeah, so if you're doing your homework on your own, you're looking on a few places, you're checking a few prices, you think $475 might have been a good idea.
Exactly.
Had you listed it with a realtor, they probably would have priced it more like $500.
Mm-hmm.
And then in a bidding war environment like the one we're in, you could have maybe even sold it for $535.
Yeah.
So you have to ask yourself, how much of a discount are you willing to give your friend, your neighbor, your buddy, whoever this is? Are you giving that person a $50,000 discount?
So the first thing to do, and again, this is the start of all of it, right? Figure out what it could sell for on the open market realistically, and what could it sell for with the perfect offer, right? The one that gets bid up and everything like that. And you want to do your math off of both of those scenarios. And yes, there can be a commission savings. So absolutely, there's times when selling it off market, if you have somebody to manage the process of the paperwork and escrow and all of that, does make sense. It does make sense. We're realtors. We're not going to sit here and sell you this idea that it never makes sense and you should always use a real estate agent, because it's definitely not true. So what we really are talking about is whether there's going to be a substantial amount of real estate related fees for all that help and support, or if there isn't, and what do those prices look like? Because all it is just massaging numbers, really. So you have the buyer. The commitment is there for a certain dollar figure. Let's talk about actual dollar figures in these scenarios so that this makes sense. So we talked about a house that is $475,000, right?
Or your buyer that's wandering around, or your buddy is like, oh yeah, I'll give you $475 for your house right now. I'll come in and buy it for you. Then you don't even have to think about it. I'll just give you $475.
Nobody involved, okay?
Right.
So you're gonna get $475. There's gonna be no real estate fees. So if you were to apply some real estate fees, what could it sell for? We told you that the market value was more like $500. Okay, so the numbers at that $500,000 sale with a listed sale would actually net out at $498,750. Okay, because really that house is going to sell for $525 more than likely if it's listed in a marketplace like ours.
Yeah.
So what we're talking about is $475,000 doing all the work on your own versus that same sale with the real estate agent at about a 5% commission, which is actually a little bit of a lower fee than normal. The net is going to be the same. The net's going to be the same.
So you'd have the same amount of money in your pocket, but you wouldn't be spending all of your time answering all these questions and dealing with all of the stuff that goes along with selling the property by yourself.
So if the house actually does sell for $525 because it was listed, now we're looking at a net of about $498,750. And when I say net, we're not talking about any of the actual sellers' fees themselves. So in most states, there's a transfer and excise tax. I want to leave all that out of it because it's just going to confuse things. Because really what we're talking about is with an agent or on your own, right?
Right. If you don't use an agent, you still have to pay taxes. You still have to pay like the escrow company or the lawyer, depending on what state you're in. You're not going to avoid some of those closing costs.
So $525, so what that would mean is you would have to get your buddy, right? You'd have to get your buddy to go from $475 to $500 with no real estate related fees, agents involved. Then it would make sense.
That's the one time it would make sense.
It
If you
would make
could
sense.
negotiate up and get actual market value on your own from your friend or whoever, if you knew with confidence and you said, no, my house is worth X and I know that for a fact, and they were willing to come up,
But would it
then
make sense?
it might make sense. I don't know. Right now,
It would,
I still think
because the workload is going to be there. The work, the risk, the time involved to massage all that out on something that the person's not used to doing.
right, and you have to be confident about that. You have to know your stuff and be able to push that sale to that point. And you also have to take on the legal risk and potential fallout if things go sideways, which I think is one of the things that people don't really think about. They think this is easy.
You know when it really makes sense? You get the friend or the person you know to exceed that $500,000 price. Now we're talking about money in your pocket for your time and energy, the risk, and all these things that we're talking about. So really that's what it boils down to, is do you know the market value of what it would sell for with real estate agents involved? And will that person who's the buddy or the friend match that so that the savings of the fees are actually savings?
So now we're gonna go back to the pros and cons part of this video, where we actually just run through some of the pros and cons, whether you want to sell your home to a friend or a family member, or just go ahead and list it with a professional realtor.
Yeah, so basically, I mean, the pros are that you can save money. No doubt, you can save money as we mapped out, but the scenario has to make sense. You got to understand the value, and then you got to work the math backwards based off of what are the fees involved and how much would it actually sell for on the open market, which you may need some help from a real estate agent on that. By the way, they'll do a market analysis for you because they think that you're going to maybe list the house with them. And you may do that, so it's worth their time.
Yeah, you may do all that research and realize like this is harder than I thought, and also I could probably make more if I list it on the open market. And then you realize maybe I don't want to sell it to my friends. So getting that market analysis, there's no harm in that.
It's more than putting a sign in the ground. It's more than ratifying an agreement. When we list a house, there's literally 5 pages worth of tasks to do. That involves a lot of marketing, which you wouldn't have because you'd be selling it direct. So let's talk about
That's
cons.
one of the cons.
That's
You're already going to the cons.
So
side.
cons, exactly. So the workload, the risk of missing something there in the agreement, which there's certain things that need to be in that agreement. If you ended up in a dispute later, you may have a contract that's not executed quite right, which could favor one party or the other. And it wouldn't be something that you may know unless you solicit a real estate attorney to kind of help you through this process. And everything is fine and dandy when one person wants to buy and sell, but when a problem arises in the agreement at the inspection or the appraisal or title on the property, that's when these things get really bad, really quick, when there's not the professionals involved.
Yeah, you guys may not understand the loopholes in the contracts, things that people like us that have been doing this for 20 years plus, you see just about everything at least twice a year, and you realize like this stuff isn't just everybody's general knowledge. It's kind of like taxes. I feel like I go to my accountant for a reason, because I don't want to know how to be an accountant. I don't want to learn that.
Typically, if you own a property or there's a renter in there, this idea comes up a lot, like, right, let me just buy the house from you. And what ends up happening a lot of times is that person either doesn't qualify or they're not willing to just pay what the open market would provide. But you got to start there. You got to know what that is, or you may kind of screw yourself on some money, you know? Again, if it's about convenience, that's different. So convenience is definitely a factor here, especially if it's a family member, because you know you're probably not going to end up in a dispute with a family member. But this situation does come up a lot. You
don't really know what that risk is until you get there, but we've seen scenarios where people don't want to close at the end of the transaction. So then you've spent money to move on. Let's say you're selling your home and you've already maybe put a down payment on another house, or you started building a home somewhere else, or, I mean, there could be a million reasons why, but you get to the end and then the other person's like, nah, I'm not gonna close.
Yeah, that can be bad.
So there's definitely some cons, definitely at least one pro if you have the right scenario.
It's got to be the right scenario.
If all the ducks align, all the stars align, however you want to see it, if everything works out for you and you want to sell your home off market and you're okay with giving some kind of discount, at least knowing and understanding what that discount looks like.
Yep. Or you just got to get that person to pay top dollar and know what that number is. So thanks for checking out the video. If you want some more real estate related talks and strategies, tips, be sure to check out the rest of the videos. And thank you so much.